Have you ever felt like you're living in two worlds, one that everyone sees, and another that only you can feel? A world of symbols, intuitions, and silent truths that no one else seems to notice? If so, this video is for you. Because today, we're diving deep into one of the rarest and most misunderstood psychological types, the introverted, intuitive, and the invisible battle they face every single day. Not everyone will understand this, but if you do, you're not alone. Among the various psychological types identified by Carl Jung, one stands out for both its rarity and its profound inner complexity: the introverted intuitive. Jung considered this type one of the most enigmatic, difficult for others to grasp, and often equally mysterious to the individual themselves. This is not a personality grounded in outward action, concrete facts, or visible emotions. Instead, it is attuned to an inner world shaped by symbols, archetypes, and premonitions that arise from the unconscious. Rather than relying on linear reasoning or sensory data, this type navigates life through an internal compass. It perceives emerging meanings that have yet to crystallize, senses psychic movements before they surface into awareness, and remains deeply attuned to the intangible. To the introverted intuitive, the practical world filled with routines, rational systems, and empirical certainties can often seem dull or even meaningless. Not out of arrogance or detachment, but because their awareness is drawn to another layer of reality, a symbolic dimension that frequently precedes what is currently manifest. In their view, facts are merely the shadows of something deeper still, forming something not yet born, but already stirring within the psyche. This type of perception is attuned not to what is, but to what is becoming, to latent potentials, to the psychic seed of what is emerging within the collective unconscious. The introverted intuitive is drawn to undercurrents that have not yet surfaced, making them exquisitely sensitive to cultural, spiritual, and existential shifts before they take visible form. But such perceptiveness carries a cost. The world rarely operates on the same wavelength. Society values what can be measured proof, results, objective evidence. Yet the very nature of this type's perception is intangible, especially in its early stages. This creates a deep and often painful gap between what the intuitive introvert perceives internally and what the external world expects or validates. Their insights, profound as they may be, are often dismissed, misunderstood, or pathologized. This is the kind of person who senses something essential about someone they've just met, who feels a rupture in the air before a crisis unfolds, who foresees outcomes long before evidence appears. But when they attempt to share what they sense, they're often met with silence, skepticism, or outright rejection. Over time, they learn to retreat into silence, to protect their inner knowing, to keep the richness of their psychic life hidden and untouched. Yet it is in this very silence that a hidden danger takes root. Jung offered a stark warning. If this type fails to find channels through language, art, or meaningful action to express their inner visions, they risk being overwhelmed by them. The inner world, once a wellspring of insight, can turn into a labyrinth. Symbolic images, if not integrated into conscious life, begin to take on a life of their own. The person ceases to observe the psyche and begins to be possessed by it. They become no longer the one who observes the images, but the one possessed by them. It is here that Jung's darker warning takes form. The gift of deep intuition, if left unanchored, can slip into dissociation, an erosion of self amid the flood of inner symbols and unconscious material. In this video, we will explore that delicate trajectory in depth. We'll examine how the introverted intuitive functions, the specific psychological risks they face, and most importantly, the profound transformative potential that emerges when this type finds meaningful avenues for expression and integration. The path of the intuitive introvert is far from easy, but it is far from ordinary. It is a journey between inner and outer worlds, a passage across unseen thresholds. Understanding this journey can not only bring clarity to those who embody this rare psychological configuration, but can also shed light on the deeper, often hidden, mysteries of the human psyche. In Jung's typology, intuition is classified as one of the irrational functions, meaning it operates outside the bounds of logic and sensory data. It perceives not through what is visible or reasoned, but through what emerges from within, from the unknown, from the soul's own symbolic language. Introverted intuition turns inward toward the deep, symbolic layers of the unconscious. It does not register what is seen, heard, or measured. Instead, it perceives what emerges often suddenly, without context or clarity from the archaic strata of the psyche. Jung described this function as the capacity to apprehend raw psychic images, symbolic impressions not yet shaped into thought, emotion, or action. The introverted intuitive lives in constant dialogue with these images. They do not see with the eyes of the body, but with the eyes of the soul. What appears mundane or insignificant to others often reveals to them hidden meanings, silent patterns, and subtle tensions. Their awareness functions like an inner antenna tuned to signals that have no spoken language, yet carry weight, shape, and psychic charge. When integrated, this kind of perception becomes a profound source of wisdom. The introverted intuitive can penetrate to the essence of situations, sense unconscious motivations in others, and foresee shifts long before they manifest in the outer world. But this gift is double-edged. The same sensitivity that allows for such deep insight also makes them vulnerable to psychic fragmentation, because the sensation function responsible for grounding the self in the present moment and the physical body is typically underdeveloped in this type. They can easily drift away from concrete reality. Their visions may become overwhelming, unmoored from time, place, and practical context. When disconnected from practical experience, intuition can begin to operate on its own autonomously, untethered from reality. The individual may find themselves adrift in a vast sea of inner images. This internal landscape is not random or meaningless, but it is also not something that can be controlled at will. Symbolic content arises from a deep psychic necessity, not from conscious intent. When these inner visions are channeled with clarity, they become fertile ground for creation ideas that spark transformation, symbols that carry healing, narratives that reveal hidden truths. But when they go unprocessed or misunderstood, they can accumulate like static, cluttering the psyche, distorting perception, and leading to confusion, paralysis, even the breakdown of rational thought. At that point, the person may no longer live in the world, but in a kind of self-reinforcing psychic echo chamber, a parallel reality shaped more by symbol than by fact. For the introverted intuitive, learning how their own intuition functions is essential, not to suppress it, but to avoid being consumed by it. They must cultivate the ability to discern what is a true symbolic insight and what is ungrounded fantasy. This discernment takes time. It requires silence, discipline, and a strong internal framework. But it also comes with a necessary caution. No matter how rich and captivating the inner world may be, it is filled with subtle traps. In the next part of the video, we'll explore those traps in depth, especially the moment when symbolic perception, left without expression or integration, begins to morph into delusion. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Thank you. Introverted intuition possesses a paradoxical quality. It is both illuminating and dangerous. It does not dwell in the present moment. Its gaze is fixed on what is not yet, on what lies just beyond the edge of awareness, whispering from the future, waiting to emerge. The introverted intuitive lives at the threshold between the present moment and what has not yet come into being. They sense the arrival of events before they unfold. Intuit shifts in the archetypal and cultural psyche before they crystallize into form. This anticipatory awareness, Jung noted, places them in a role not unlike that of the prophet one, who perceives what others have yet to see. But this position carries a deep and painful paradox. What is seen cannot be proven. What is felt cannot be justified with evidence. And what is intuited rarely finds validation in others. This creates a persistent tension, a clash between the inner certainty of vision and the outer world's indifference or worse, rejection not over time. This dissonance may lead the introverted intuitive down one of two dangerous paths. Either they begin to question and suppress their own perceptions, or they retreat so fully into their inner, knowing that they cut themselves off from the world. In both cases, the divide between what is inwardly perceived and what is outwardly denied starts to erode the psyche from within. Jung illustrated this with a powerful example. A patient who, during analysis, described a vivid inner image of a black snake lodged in her abdomen. It was not a metaphor she consciously invented, but a raw, symbolic expression rising from the depths of her unconscious. A vision charged with meaning, beyond words or logic. This is the realm the introverted intuitive inhabits, a space where the soul speaks in images, often long before the mind or society is ready to listen. As the treatment progressed, the snake began to rise within her, eventually emerging from her mouth and transforming into a serpent with a golden head. To the uninitiated, this might sound like a strange hallucination or a fevered fantasy. But Jung saw it differently. He recognized it as a symbolic image of inner transformation, an expression of the individuation process made visible through the unconscious. The black snake represented repressed psychic material, dark, hidden content that, when integrated, was transfigured into a symbol of renewal and healing. The serpent's golden head was not madness, but metamorphosis. This example illustrates with striking clarity how introverted intuition functions. It does not speak in facts or logic, it speaks in images. It does not explain causes, it reveals direction, meaning, and destiny. The danger arises when these inner images have no path to the outer world, no translation into language, creativity, or conscious reflection. When symbols remain unexpressed, they begin to fold in on themselves. What was once visionary becomes insular. The boundary between insight and illusion starts to dissolve. The intuitive mind, so attuned to the symbolic, can lose the ability to discern whether it is being guided or misled. What was once sacred vision becomes private delusion. The line between revelation and madness is razor thin, and the introverted intuitive walks it every day to prevent intuition from turning into a psychic maze. It's crucial to understand the mechanisms that can lead to a break with reality. In the next part of this video, we'll explore that process in detail, the moment when unexpressed symbols begin to dominate the psyche, leading to archetypal inflation and the collapse of the ego's grounding in the real world. The introverted intuitive is, by nature, a solitary being, not out of choice, but due to the structure of their psyche. Their world is rich, complex, and inward. But without expression, even the richest inner life can become a prison. Their attention is drawn to what cannot yet be seen, to what has not taken form, to what rises from the depths of the unconscious in symbols, visions, and premonitions. But when this inner orientation is not grounded through expression or mediated through contact with the outer world, it becomes fertile ground for identity confusion, and in more extreme cases, for delusions of grandeur. Jung referred to this phenomenon as inflatio, a state in which the ego becomes swollen with unconscious material and begins to identify with powerful archetypal forces, losing sight of its own limitations. This process does not announce itself dramatically. It unfolds quietly. The introverted intuitive, with their heightened ability to perceive deep symbolic patterns, may begin to feel they have been chosen for a special purpose. At first, this sense of uniqueness may reflect genuine psychological sensitivity. But over time, it can distort into a kind of messianic complex. They may begin to believe they are carriers of absolute truth, visionaries the world refuses to recognize, prophets misunderstood by a society asleep. Criticism is interpreted not as feedback, but as persecution. Doubt becomes proof of others' ignorance or inferiority. Their growing isolation is no longer experienced as a burden, but justified as a sign of their elevated insight. No one understands me because I am more evolved. This kind of psychic inflation is especially dangerous because it erodes the capacity for self-reflection. The individual becomes absorbed in their inner symbolic world, unable to distinguish between archetypal imagery and objective reality. They identify with the figures that emerge from the unconscious, the wise one, the martyr, the prophet, and in doing so, they lose touch with the grounded, ordinary aspects of being human. This over-identification with archetypes ultimately leads to psychic fragmentation. The intuitive function, originally a source of deep insight, gradually becomes an escape route from reality. The demands of practical life are dismissed. Relationships are reduced to roles within the inner narrative, serving only to confirm the individual's symbolic identity. Any challenge or contradiction is perceived not as an opportunity for growth, but as a threat to the sanctity of the inner vision. Jung noted that this dynamic was especially common in individuals who emotionally withdrew and refused to adapt to the demands of the outer world. But the greatest danger, he warned, was not the isolation itself, it was what came next. The total colonization of consciousness by the unconscious. In this state, the ego no longer mediates between the inner world and outer reality. It becomes a passive container, overwhelmed by symbolic content. Perception warps, judgment loses its anchor. Life begins to unfold within a private mythology where everything appears meaningful, yet nothing is truly connected to the real world. And yet, it is essential to understand, not every encounter with the symbolic leads to collapse. The presence of the unconscious is not inherently pathological. In fact, it can be the seed of transformation if the individual learns to relate to it consciously. There is an antidote, and it begins with expression, with the ability to give form to the invisible, to translate inner vision into word, image, gesture, or sound. When the symbolic contents of the unconscious find a path outward, when they are shaped, spoken, painted, written, or ritualized, they cease to be a prison. They become creation. In the next part of this video, we'll explore just that. How intuitive individuals like Kafka, Van Gogh, and Jung himself were able to channel their inner landscapes into works that shifted the very fabric of collective consciousness. The psychic survival of the introverted intuitive depends largely on this, their capacity to give form to the formless. For Jung, an unexpressed symbol does not simply disappear. It remains within the psyche as an autonomous force, an undigested psychic fragment that acts like a foreign body, demanding attention, distorting perception, and draining energy. The only way to truly integrate these internal images is by offering them a shape in the external world. Symbolic expression, whether through art, writing, music, or sacred ritual, is not a luxury. It is a psychological necessity. This act of externalizing the symbol is what separates the creative visionary from the fragmented mystic. When the introverted intuitive learns to channel their perceptions outward, their symbolic solitude becomes shared language. Their inner strangeness becomes meaningful expression. Their isolation becomes impact. The labyrinth of the inner world becomes a map one that others can walk, learn from, and be transformed by. And this creative act has a double effect. It relieves internal tension, bringing order to the psychic chaos, and it offers the world something it didn't yet know it needed: A glimpse into the invisible forces shaping our collective soul. History offers countless examples of individuals who seem to operate from a deeply intuitive and introverted place. Franz Kafka, with his surreal and labyrinthine narratives, transformed his sense of symbolic alienation into works that still resonate with the absurdity of modern life. Vincent van Gogh, unable to conform to the practical demands of the world, channeled his turbulent emotional vision into explosive brushstrokes, each painting an urgent attempt to express the turmoil of his inner world. Even Carl Jung, who identified this psychological type within himself, crafted his most profound writings as efforts to articulate intricate internal experiences into structured, comprehensible systems. Yet what these figures demonstrate is not merely brilliance or artistic talent. They reveal that symbolic expression acts as a vital bridge between the inner and outer realms. When this bridge is absent, symbols accumulate and turn inward, distorting perception and reality. But when expression becomes possible through art, word, gesture, or action, the inner image is externalized, and the psyche begins to reorganize itself. The intuitive faculty, once isolated, starts to collaborate with conscious awareness. In this light, creativity is not just a gift, it is a psychological process, a pathway toward integration. However, even the most powerful symbolic expression is not sufficient if it lacks grounding in reality. By nature, the introverted intuitive type often neglects the body, daily rhythms, and concrete limits, leaving them vulnerable to disconnection. Creativity can slip into compulsion. Inspiration may become a form of escape. True integration occurs only when symbolic insight is anchored in sensory experience, when intuition is balanced by sensation. In the next section, we will delve into this crucial dynamic, how simple, embodied practices rooted in the body and heart, the natural world, can serve as essential counterweights to psychic fragmentation. If any of this resonates with you, you'll likely find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It distills Jung's core concepts into clear, practical tools to help you explore and understand your inner world more deeply. You can find the link in the pinned comment. The introverted intuitive function operates beyond the bounds of time, physicality, and linear thought. It plunges into the unconscious, gathering symbols, impressions, and future-oriented insights, then resurfaces with visions that don't quite belong to the concrete world. This capacity is what gives the introverted intuitive their mysterious brilliance, but it's also their vulnerability. Without grounding, this inward gaze can spiral, turning into confusion or overwhelm. That's why Jung emphasized the need to integrate the inferior function, sensation. Sensation anchors us. It keeps us rooted in the present moment, attuned to the body, and connected to the material world. It's the function that registers what is real and immediate, the warmth of sunlight on the skin, the sharp bitterness of coffee, the solid weight of an object held in the hand. For the introverted intuitive, the world of sensation often feels alien, its signals dismissed as mundane, even irrelevant. Yet it is precisely this language of the senses that offers an antidote to excessive abstraction. In the simplicity of physical experience, walking, cooking, gardening, crafting, or maintaining a daily rhythm, this type can find essential grounding. Returning to the body, to routine, and to the present moment doesn't diminish symbolic depth. It sustains it. When the introverted intuitive learns to move between deep internal vision and concrete, everyday practice, their insights shift from disorienting labyrinths into stabilizing roots. They become capable of navigating both inner and outer worlds, the invisible and the tangible, with fluidity. This movement between realms is the mark of true psychological maturity. In this state, symbols are no longer objects of passive reflection. They become active forces that shape choices, relationships, and the trajectory of one's life. Not as oracles, But as compasses quiet, steady guides doubt in this context, everyday rituals take on a therapeutic role. They need not be elaborate or mystical. Lighting a candle at dawn, journaling before bed, or thoughtfully arranging a workspace, these small, intentional acts carve out a center within the chaos. They send a message to the unconscious. There is structure, there is body, there is reality. In this ritualized space, symbols can descend to earth without fracturing the psyche. Integration of sensation is not a limitation. It is the soil in which intuition can truly bloom. And yet, even with symbolic expression and a foothold in the real, the introverted intuitive faces one final test: living authentically in a world that often dismisses what cannot be measured, explained, or commodified. How can one remain true to inner vision in a culture dominated by logic, speed, and productivity? How does one keep listening to the quiet language of the soul when the external world demands conformity to the concrete? Even when the intuitive introverted type learns to express themselves symbolically and ground their insights in tangible practices, they face a challenge that remains largely unseen by others, and perhaps the most difficult of all: how to remain faithful to their inner truth in a world that systematically denies the invisible. Modern culture is centered on the concrete, the immediate, the quantifiable. It values data, productivity, efficiency, and visible outcomes. Intuition, symbolic, insight, and quiet reflection are not just overlooked, they're often mocked, pathologized, or dismissed as irrelevant. For the intuitive introvert, this creates a deep and ongoing inner conflict. The pull between staying true to one's soul and the pressure to conform each day. They face a decision, whether to silence their vision to fit into dominant narratives, or to stand by it, even at the cost of being misunderstood, marginalized, or alone. And this is not a theoretical choice. It plays out in the small details of daily life, in conversations where truth must be swallowed, in workplaces where silence is mistaken for weakness, in roles where expressing deeper insight risks being seen as unprofessional or strange. Yet this inner tension doesn't have to lead to defeat. Carl Jung called this struggle essential to the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming one's true self. For the intuitive introvert, living their symbolic truth isn't about withdrawing from the world. It's about moving through it without losing that internal compass. It's about carrying a vision that may never be validated and still choosing to live it. Because the purpose of intuition is not to persuade, conform, or succeed. It is to illuminate the invisible paths that are yet to be created. To live symbolically in a materialistic world is a quiet form of resistance. It's choosing meaning over convenience, depth over appearance. It's maintaining a relationship with the unseen, even when everything around insists it has no worth. And when an intuitive introvert finds the strength to honor what they know and feel, they become a quietly transformative presence. Not through force, but through the sheer authenticity of their being. They remind others subtly, powerfully, that there is more to life than what can be measured or explained. If you resonate with this invisible dimension, if you live through symbols, intuitions, and insights that others often misshare, your experience in the comments. How have you managed this inner crossing? What practices help you stay whole? How do you bridge the gap between your inner life and the outer world? Your story could offer a light for someone walking the same hidden path. And don't forget to watch the next video. It may continue this reflection and offer a deeper key for your journey. It matters. See you there.